Welcome to the Good Governance in Sport module in the framework of CPM's project. Today's session is about, what is good governance in sport, why is good governance in sport important, why do we need good governance in sports, etc. We will also try to introduce and give you the necessary knowledge to understand the importance of EU and national level principles on good governance in sport, what are safeguarding and risk management, and also how properly and successfully implement strategy development. In today's module we will try to give you more useful information about 1. National governance requirements for sport. Understanding of EU and national level principles on good governance in sport. 2. Safeguarding and risk management. Knowledge of the impact on organizations and individuals relating to safeguarding and how to assess and monitor risk. 3. Strategy development. Able to identify the key aspects of strategic development in the field of sport and its connection with local community delivery. What is the main concept of good governance? Good governance means that processes and institutions produce results that meet the needs of society while making the best use of resources at their disposal. The concept of efficiency in the context of good governance also covers the sustainable use of natural resources and the protection of the environment. According to the United Nations, good governance is measured by 1. Participation requires that all groups, particularly those most vulnerable, have direct or representative access to the systems of government. This manifests as a strong civil society and citizens with the freedom of association and expression. 2. Rule of law is exemplified by impartial legal systems that protect the human rights and civil liberties of all citizens, particularly minorities. This is indicated by an independent judicial branch and a police force free from corruption. 3. Transparency means that citizens understand and have access to the means and manner in which decisions are made, especially if they are directly affected by such decisions. This information must be provided in an understandable and accessible format, typically translated through the media. 4. Responsiveness simply involves that institutions respond to their stakeholders within a reasonable time frame. 5. Consensus-oriented is demonstrated by an agenda that seeks to mediate between the many different needs, perspectives, and expectations of a diverse citizenry. Decisions needs to be made in a manner that reflects a deep understanding of the historical, cultural, and social context of the community. 6. Equity and inclusiveness depends on ensuring that all the members of a community feel included and empowered to improve or maintain their well-being, especially those individuals and groups that are the most vulnerable. 7. Effectiveness and efficiency is developed through the sustainable use of resources to meet the needs of a society. Sustainability refers to both ensuring social investments carry through and natural resources are maintained for future generations. 8. Accountability refers to institutions being ultimately accountable to the people and one another. This includes government agencies, civil society, and the private sector all being accountable to one another as well. At the third meeting of the Expert Group on Good Governance, held on June 6, 2012, the members and observers of the group discussed the issue of good governance principles in sport on the basis of a document presenting national rules and codes existing in the EU member states. Participants agreed that some overarching principles of good governance can be identified across the board, but that it is important to maintain flexibility and to have a pragmatic approach, with a view to taking into account the vast differences existing in sporting structures and to focus on recommendations that can bring an added value at EU level. For the purposes of its recommendations, the expert group Good Governance adopts the following definition of good governance in sport: the framework and culture within which a sports body sets policy, delivers its strategic objectives, engages with stakeholders, monitors performance, evaluates and manages risk and reports to its constituents on its activities and progress, including the delivery of effective, sustainable and proportionate sports policy and regulation. Whilst sport is by definition a global phenomenon and good governance principles are not intrinsically linked to any particular territory, the European Union, for its particular role and mission, can provide guidance for the good governance of sport at national, European and international level. For instance, the EU is an organization based on values and on the rule of law which it has the task to promote. This includes the following: decision-making systems based on separation of powers between the legislative, executive and judiciary bodies, public procurement based on the principles of impartiality, transparency and equal opportunities, recognition of social dialogue and of the role of social partners in the fields of labor law and employment. In addition, the EU is uniquely positioned to facilitate the exchanges of good practices, transfers of knowledge and the networking of stakeholders active at national and international level. In this respect, The EU institutions have a role to play in ensuring that good governance principles adopted at EU level are recognized and implemented in all the member states. The EU can also facilitate the promotion of principles of good governance in sport beyond its borders with both sporting bodies and public authorities of third countries. According to the EU Expert Group on Good Governance is measured by 10 principles. The principles of good governance in sport have been published in 2013, including representatives of several member states, sports organizations and sports NGOs, which has been established on the basis of the Council resolution on an EU Work Plan for Sport 2011 to 2014. The group believes that sports organizations that neglect the importance of good governance and do not implement such principles can expect their autonomy to be threatened. The EU Expert Group on Good Governance proposes 10 principles. 1. Clarity of purpose/objectives. Clarity of purpose is a crucial element of good governance. Although being independent of mind, open and transparent, demonstrating integrity and being accountable are all essential prerequisites of good governance, they will not, on their own, guarantee organizational effectiveness. 2. Code of ethics. The advancement of ethics and moral values in good governance suggests legality of government action, rationality in policy and decision-making, evolving a sense of responsibility, ensuring accountability, strengthening work commitment, creating excellence, facilitating spirit of individual and organizational goals. 3. Stakeholder identification and roles. The stakeholders could be an individual or organization whose attitudes or actions influence the success of a sports team, sports participant or an entire sport. 3.1. Involvement of stakeholders. Each sports body will have different stakeholders reflecting its particular range of participants and interested parties. Such stakeholders may include players/athletes, managers, owners, coaches, leagues, clubs, supporters, agents, match officials. Sports bodies should also as appropriate liaise with commercial partners and equipment manufacturers. Each sports body should evaluate how best to utilize the input and expertise of its stakeholders in its activities, consultation processes and decision-making procedures. Stakeholders may be given different levels of involvement depending on the sports body concerned. 3.2. Minimum standards for stakeholders' representation. Sports bodies should establish minimum representation and democratic standards that stakeholders should meet in order to participate in consultation and/or decision-making. 3.3. Commitment from stakeholders. A commitment from relevant stakeholders should also be sought, confirming that they support the overall objectives and vision of the sports body concerned and will make decisions and generally act in the best interests of the sport, without prejudice to the definition of labor relations between social partners through social dialogue. 3.4. Formalization of role of stakeholders. Clarity on the role of members, stakeholders and participants in consultation processes and decision-making is critical. The formalization of roles promotes accountability and should assist in minimizing the prospects of any party exceeding their powers, avoiding consultation on key decisions, duplicating resources and/or generating tensions associated with unbalanced policy or decision-making. 4. Democracy and minimum standards. 4.1. Clear organizational framework. Sports bodies should establish a clear organizational framework for membership and decision-making via appropriately representative, inclusive and competently populated bodies implementing fit-for-purpose, democratic procedures and acting in pursuance of the objectives, strategic plan and vision of the sports body concerned. 4.2. Identification of decision-making organs. The organizational framework should identify all decision-making organs of the sports body and their interrelationship. The statutes of sports bodies should clearly set out the various responsibilities and decision-making authority of the different organs, including, where applicable, Congress, Council or General Assembly, the executive body or board, technical or standing committees and disciplinary/judicial bodies. 4.3. Identification of procedural rules. For all decision-making organs, sports bodies should clearly identify procedural rules and the rights of members/stakeholders to participate in consultations, debates and/or decision-making processes. 4.4. Role and rights of members and stakeholders. Ordinarily, the constitution of a sports body should include details of the entitlement of relevant members, stakeholders and participants to vote at meetings, majorities required for particular decisions, regularity of meetings, the right to receive notice of meetings, order of business under consideration, and the opportunity to make representations. Once established, there should be strict compliance with the Constitution and procedural rules. 4.5. Minimum democratic principles for appointment to decision-making bodies. Within Europe there are many different types of democratic system in operation, and it is not practicable to be prescriptive over the adoption of any particular democratic process. In key decision-making areas all relevant personnel should be involved as determined by the sports body. 5. Delegation and committees. Clarity of responsibilities for the different organs that make decisions within a sports body is critical to promoting the efficiency of policy development and effective governance. 5.1. Delegation of tasks to members and stakeholders. Appropriate delegations of tasks to members and stakeholders should be permitted subject to a proportionate level of monitoring and supervision by the sports body, and provided always that such members or stakeholders possess the relevant expertise to fulfill the delegated responsibility and, if applicable, that they possess a mandate for the stakeholder group they represent. 5.2. Appointment of technical and/or expert committees. Sporting bodies should allow for the appointment of technical or expert committees, whether standing or ad hoc, and/or working groups for specialist work and advice on relevant issues. The terms of reference, reporting lines and status of committee decisions or recommendations should be clearly identified and communicated to all members, stakeholders and participants. 5.3. Composition of committees. Appropriate selection policies should be in place for committees or working groups to ensure that suitable experts are appointed and there is a balance of views, gender equality and diversity. 6. Management. In most sports bodies, the board constitutes the executive organ, providing a supervisory and monitoring role over the day-to-day activities and management of the organization. The board therefore represents an essential component of good governance in sport. The successful implementation and acceptance of good governance in a sporting body is influenced by whether and how well the board and the management embrace good governance. The board and management should seek to promote a culture of good governance throughout the entire organization, for example by conducting appropriate training and qualification measures, among other things. Important requirements for a board to be effective are as follows. Requirements for the board. 6.1. The governing documents, including committee structures, must be fit for purpose, available at all times to members and other stakeholders. 6.2. The chairperson should possess strong leadership skills. 6.3. Decision-making powers should be clearly identified along with delegated responsibilities and authorizations granted by the board. 6.4. Board members should act independently in the best interests of the sports body as a whole and in accordance with their legal and fiduciary duties. 6.5. Where proportionate and justified, an appropriate number of the board should be independent and appointed via open procedures. 6.6. The board must promote equality and diversity and actively work to attract a diverse range of members, including, in particular but not limited to, an appropriate gender balance at board level as part of an overall inclusivity program. 6.7. Board members must have the necessary attributes, skills and competence required to carry out the role effectively, with skills being regularly assessed and performance evaluated. 6.8. Appropriate term limits for board members should be in place as part of succession planning processes. 6.9. A board must not be too large or small and must hold an appropriate number of meetings to reflect the needs of the sports body. 6.10. The board should have an appropriate policy on conflict of interest declarations and management. 6.11. There should be a clear policy and process for the removal of board members for misconduct. It is important that the relationship between the board and management of a sports body is well structured, including regular engagement, oversight policies and the setting of key performance indicators for managers. This is an integral part of the overall strategic operation of the sports body, with management and staff implementing policies determined by the board or sovereign body of the organization. In this regard, the CEO or General Secretary has a critical role to play in promoting staff and management performance that is in accordance with board expectations and can deliver the strategic plan of the sports body and its longer-term objectives. 7. Judicial/disciplinary procedures. 7.1. Need for an appropriate judicial/disciplinary framework. Sports bodies should put in place a suitable judicial/disciplinary framework that meets their particular needs, and any requirements of its international sporting family. The framework should be proportionate to the size, membership and type of cases on which it is required to adjudicate. 7.2. Need for a separate judicial/disciplinary code. It is preferable for a separate judicial/disciplinary code to be developed incorporating clear disciplinary rules, sanctions and procedures. Members, stakeholders and all participants should agree to be bound by the code and the sanctions imposed. Members, stakeholders and participants should, where practicable, Be educated on key rules and obligations under the code so they are aware of what is expected of them and the consequences of non-compliance. Interactive web-based initiatives can be used for this purpose. 7.3. Impartiality of adjudicators. 7.3.1. Adjudicators should be impartial. 7.3.2. Sports bodies should monitor legal requirements in this regard as well as any minimum standards imposed by their international, national or regional bodies. To mitigate risk of challenge, appropriate codes of practice can be developed for judicial personnel, providing guidance on when it may not be appropriate for them to sit in judgment. 7.4. Skills and expertise of adjudicators. Adjudicators must possess the necessary skills and expertise to evaluate evidence, assess credibility of witnesses and make reasoned decisions. To aid transparency, it is preferable if adjudications are supported by written reasons and where possible made public. Training and disciplinary procedures. The application of rules and production of written reasons should where possible be undertaken by adjudicators. 7.5. Fair trial. Basic procedures to ensure the right of the defense should be established in accordance with general principles of law. 7.6. Appropriate appeal framework. An appropriate appeal framework should be put in place by sports bodies. This supports overall due process and provides a further layer of risk management as erroneous decisions can be rectified. Where appropriate, a sports body may also consider appointing an ombudsperson. 8. Inclusivity and youth engagement. 8.1. Inclusivity of sports bodies. Sports bodies should be inclusive and represent the diverse nature of society and their sports, whether by reference to gender, race, sexuality, disability, age or otherwise. By selecting from the widest possible talent pool for all positions and at all levels, the most skilled, experienced performers can be identified and engaged by sports bodies. 8.2. Adoption and implementation of an inclusivity strategy. Having appropriate regard to applicable laws, sports bodies should develop and implement robustly an inclusivity strategy incorporating recruitment, selection and appointment procedures. This strategy should be monitored and steps taken to identify how any issues of underrepresentation can be suitably addressed at all levels of the organization. 8.3. Engagement with youth groups. The long-term viability of sport and sports bodies depends on future generations of participants being attracted to sport as competitors, match officials, volunteers and administrators. In developing sports policy and promotional initiatives, it is good practice for sports bodies to engage and consult with representative youth groups as a form of future-proofing for the sport to minimize generational disconnects. For example, establishing youth boards respecting gender balance and diversity may assist in promoting engagement and succession planning. In this context, particular attention should be paid to the issue of protecting the physical and moral integrity of young sportspeople, notably against sexual harassment. Sports bodies must also recognize that to attract new generations of administrators, technology and IT will play an important part. Increasingly, mobile and remote video conferencing will need to be utilized for governance, disciplinary and sports administrative activity, and those sports bodies which embrace such technology are more likely to encourage ongoing participation in administrative and related matters by future generations. Technology will also be crucial in attracting and retaining volunteers. 9. Statutes, rules and regulations. 9.1. Availability of statutes, rules and regulations. The statutes, rules and regulations of sports bodies should be available as public documents, be clearly drafted and identify the process for amendment. 9.2. Consultation for amending statutes, rules and regulations. When amendments to statutes, rules, regulations or key policies are being contemplated, an appropriate and proportionate consultation process should be put in place with relevant members and stakeholders within a suitable time frame. Wherever possible, the rationale for any adjustment should be available along with supporting evidence. It should also be made clear which particular objective and part of the strategic plan is being advanced by the proposal so that fully informed decisions can be taken. 10. Accountability and transparency. 10.1. Establishment of accountability standards, checks and balances. Sports bodies should establish clear levels of oversight and accountability for their various decision-making bodies to ensure that powers are exercised appropriately and consistently with the objectives and functions of the relevant body. Proportionate checks and balances should be developed by the sports body concerned. 10.2. Performance indicators. Key performance indicators and evaluation procedures commensurate with the size of the sports body should be set at all levels of the organization to promote efficiency and good management. 10.3. Internal control measures. Sports bodies should adopt proportionate, fit-for-purpose internal controls, reporting requirements, data protection policies and financial management strategies to at least the level required by applicable laws. Such policies should include clear financial authorization limits and formalization of agreements in legally enforceable form. 10.4. Financial information, produced in accordance with applicable laws and subject to appropriate auditing standards, should be made available to members, stakeholders and the public wherever possible. All such financial information should be clearly presented and preferably form part of an annual report of the activities of the sports body. 10.5. Distribution of funds. If the sports body makes financial distributions to members and/or stakeholders, such distribution should be documented and made subject to appropriate terms and conditions and ongoing reporting requirements to the distributing body on the ultimate deployment of such funds. 10.6. Risk management. Sports bodies should adopt effective and proportionate risk management arrangements designed to identify, assess, control, manage and mitigate risk across all of their activities. This should include evaluating the optimum legal form for the sports body and/or its members to operate under and putting in place appropriate insurance arrangements. 10.7. Confidentiality. Sports bodies should develop appropriate confidentiality protocols and codes which are capable of rigorous enforcement. They should also have clear policies on who may speak with the media and in what circumstances. Where possible, sports bodies should develop rapid, crisis response protocols to be deployed in specific scenarios. 10.8. External and internal communication. In addition to developing transparent external communication policies, effective and transparent internal communications for staff, members, volunteers and stakeholders should be developed so they are aware of important developments, events, meetings, policy changes and opportunities. 10.9. Professional development of staff and volunteers. Continuing professional development for all personnel and volunteers within sports bodies should be promoted wherever possible along with clear guidelines for staff conduct. 1. What is your definition of safeguarding? Safeguarding means protecting people's health, well-being and human rights. It's fundamental to high-quality health and social care and is about keeping everyone safe and taking care of their well-being. We all have a role to play in keeping others safe and people should know what to do if they have any concerns. That's why we're working to support parents, carers, organizations, associations, clubs, activity providers, instructors/teachers/coaches and leaders to safeguard children and adults at risk. Safeguarding in sport is the process of protecting children and adults from harm by providing a safe space in which to play sport and be active. Are you an organization, association or body that provides services for clubs/groups that directly deliver sport and physical activity? For example, you may be a governing body of sport, a county association of youth clubs, or an umbrella organization for disability groups that are involved in the design and delivery of sporting activities. You may own a sports franchise, or you may even deliver some activities yourself. Regardless of whether you are or aren't coming into direct contact with children and adults, you have a responsibility for safeguarding. 2. How do you determine safeguarding risk? Look for any indicators that suggest a person is at risk of harm, such as changes to demeanor or behavior. Make a point of recording these indicators. Through monitoring these signs and reviewing them regularly, you may identify a safeguarding issue. Just like all other risks, you must include safeguarding risks in your risk register and review them regularly. Your sport organization must consider safeguarding risks at both an operational and strategic level. A strategic safeguarding risk usually comes from outside the organization. This could include new regulations which affect who you can employ, the types of checks needed for staff, and costs of these, or duties from public bodies you enter into contracts with. An operational safeguarding risk usually comes from inside the organization. For safeguarding, this could include specific hazards to staff, volunteers or those you work with to experience harm or abuse, managing specific blind spots in the environment or venue or risk which arise from your delivery, for example emotional harm due to your work. 3. What types of harm can children and adults experience? 3.1. Self-neglect covers a wide range of behavior, neglecting to care for one's personal hygiene, health or surroundings and includes behavior such as hoarding. 3.2. Modern slavery encompasses slavery, human trafficking, forced labor and domestic servitude. 3.3. Domestic abuse includes psychological, physical, sexual, financial and emotional abuse perpetrated by anyone within a person's family. It also includes so-called honor-based violence. 3.4. Discriminatory discrimination is abuse which centers on a difference or perceived difference, particularly with respect to race, gender or disability or any of the protected characteristics. 3.5. Organizational includes neglect and poor care practice within an institution or specific care for settings such as a hospital or care home, for example, or in relation to care provided in one's own home. This may range from one-off incidents to ongoing ill treatment. It can be through neglect or poor professional practice as a result of the structure, policies, processes and practices within an organization. 3.6. Physical includes hitting, slapping, pushing, kicking, misuse of medication, restraint or inappropriate sanctions. 3.7. Sexual includes rape, indecent exposure, sexual harassment, inappropriate looking or touching, sexual teasing or innuendo, sexual photography, subjection to pornography or witnessing sexual acts, indecent exposure and sexual assault or sexual acts to which the adult has not consented or was pressured into consenting. 3.8. Financial or material includes theft, fraud, internet scamming, coercion in relation to an adult's financial affairs or arrangements, including in connection with wills, property, inheritance or financial transactions, or the misuse or misappropriation of property, possessions or benefits. 3.9. Neglect/acts of omission includes ignoring medical or physical care needs, failing to provide access to appropriate health, social care or educational services, the withholding of the necessities of life, such as medication, adequate nutrition and heating. 3.10. Emotional or psychological includes threats of harm or abandonment, deprivation of contact, humiliation, blaming, controlling, intimidation, coercion, harassment, verbal abuse, isolation or withdrawal from services or supportive networks. 4. Safeguarding in sport, why it is so important. Having an effective and robust safeguarding framework in your sport organization promotes the welfare of children and adults, protects them from harm by creating a safe and inclusive environment for participants and volunteers. It is necessary for all sporting organizations involving children and young adults to have a safeguarding system in place. 4.1.1. Does your organization have the correct safeguarding policies and procedures in place? All sporting organizations should have the appropriate and relevant protective safeguards in place to provide a safe space for children and young adults participating in all levels of sport. A key aspect of safeguarding is having the appropriate and relevant written policies and procedures in place and training these out to everyone involved. It is crucial that all participants, staff and volunteers are aware of your safeguarding procedures and are trained in your safeguarding practices. Compliance with your policies and procedures is a key. Safeguarding policies and procedures are detailed guidelines and instructions that will support your organization's overarching safeguarding policy statement. 4.1.2. Are your staff/volunteers adequately trained in safeguarding? Safeguarding training will vary. There are numerous online and in-person training providers. The level of training your organization offers to its employees and volunteers will depend on your organization's needs. It is important to keep training fresh and relevant, and for management teams and board members to also be aware of their safeguarding responsibilities. 4.1.3. Does your organization have the correct reporting systems in place? A recorded reporting system is fundamental. It is widely accepted that having comprehensive reporting systems in place allow participants, parents and everyone involved to feel safer. It is important to establish an agreed reporting system so that if safeguarding referrals are made, everyone in your organization is aware of the appropriate reporting system to follow. The makeup and complexity of your reporting system will be dependent on the size and type of your sporting organization. 4.1.4. Do your board members understand their safeguarding responsibilities? We recommend designated management responsibility for safeguarding. This may not mean an individual director, but it could mean board-level involvement in reviewing safeguarding issues. Most organizations have nominated safeguarding officers, and they will need to report to the management team, where safeguarding issues and trends should be discussed, reviewed and analyzed. If safeguarding investigations or inquiries are launched by either the police, governing bodies or local authorities, it is quite common that a nominated management board representative need to take charge of the investigation. 4.1.5. Are your safeguarding policies and arrangements specific to your sport? There are common safeguarding principles that will be relevant to every sport. However, it is important that specific safeguarding policies and arrangements are developed for your individual sport. For example, the safeguarding policies and procedures in relation to coaching individual young gymnastics will be entirely different to those that need to be in place for coaching grassroots football. 4.1.6. What happens when your organization receives a safeguarding report/concern? It is important to have a set policy and procedure in place for how to deal with a safeguarding report or concern. Many investigations fall short right from the very beginning when nobody knows what they should be doing. If the police, governing body or local authority gets involved with your organization following a report or concern, one of the first questions that you will be asked is how the initial safeguarding report or concern was dealt with. It will be necessary to have comprehensive written procedures around this, and all staff and volunteers involved should understand the importance of record keeping. 4.1.7. Does your organization need to do anything if it already has policies and procedures in place? We expect most sporting organizations to have basic policies and procedures in place, as this is and has been a hot topic for the past 10 years. However, it is vital that policies and procedures are regularly reviewed and kept up to date, that training is regularly refreshed, and that everyone understands their roles and obligations in relation to safeguarding. 4.1.8. What happens if an external safeguarding investigation is launched? An investigation can be launched following safeguarding disclosures being made to police, governing bodies or local authorities. If an investigation is launched, then there will be considerations as to whether or not any individuals involved should be subject to suspension or immediate dismissal. In addition to the employment issues, you will also need to consider reputation management issues. This will include GDPR considerations and potentially publicity, brand and management advice. 1. Why is risk management important in sport? The process of risk management can be implemented as part of a best practice management system within the sport organization and sport sector. The process enables risk factors that might lead to injuries to be identified and the levels of risk associated with activities to be estimated and evaluated. Sport risk management is an important thing to focus in organization, especially sport organizations, to practice in organization. Risk management comes early years 1970, and nowadays risk management practices is increases and takes serious in risk management practices. Sport today changes from recreation to professional activities, including sport industry, athletes and professional coach, sports staff, sport volunteers, etc. Everyone participate in sport industry, including athletes, coaches, managers, sport officers, organizer, and all manufacture sport equipment exposes to risk. 2. What does risk management include? Risk management is the process of identifying, assessing and controlling threats to an organization's capital and earnings. These risks stem from a variety of sources, including financial uncertainties, legal liabilities, technology issues, strategic management errors, accidents and natural disasters. 3. Risks which can be covered by a risk management program include 3.1. Legal risks, losses and costs arising from legal actions for breach of a common law or statutory duty of care. 3.2. Physical risks, injuries to participants and the public. 3.3. Financial risks, increased insurance premiums, costs associated with injuries for business reasons, loss of financial stability and asset value, replacement costs and earning capacity, and increased external administrative costs. The discipline of risk management is introduced and covers the framework for the strategic sports risk management process. Various elements of the sport risk management process are assessed with a view to help you develop an understanding of the practical approach of risk management in sport. 1. Identify the risks for sport organizations and analyze risk reduction strategies for the organizations. 2. Analyze the impact risk management has on the business of sport. 3. Apply risk management concepts to the sports environment. 4. Analyze and evaluate risk management concepts in sports environment. 5. Apply risk management sport concepts. Strategy development in sport. 1. Sport development strategies. The task of any sport organization is to develop their sport at both ends of the spectrum, at the grassroots level and at the high-performance level. This is true at any level of sports management. A sport organization must ensure there is sufficient recruitment of participants, provide programs that enable participants to flourish, and prepare outstanding participants for representation at the next level up. A sport organization at the national level will be concerned with the total participation nationally in the sport, the pathways that may assist those participants that have talent and ambition to rise up, and the opportunities that are provided to the highest echelon of participants to compete in the international arena. The most successful sport development strategies are 1.1. Education of coaches. Coaches wanting to move up the sport development system will generally implement a variety of additional measures to gain knowledge and expertise. These measures might include self-study, including the purchase of print and video materials, working with a mentor coach, nominating themselves to coach representative teams, etc. 1.2. Provision and improvement of sport facilities. Participation in sport is all about enjoyment and the quality of the environment is all important. The critically important aspect of facilities, irrespective of indoor or outdoor, is quality of the playing surface and lighting, floodlighting. For indoor sports, another critically important aspect of facilities is air conditioning and/or air ventilation. In addition to these aspects, quality sport facilities include a. Social areas with food servery and/or drinks bar. b. Clean and tidy changing areas with lockers. c. Spectator seating with protection from sun and rain. d. Shop for equipment purchase, hire and/or repair. e. Car parking. 1.3. Recruitment of participants. Recruitment is a very big issue in sport. At the club level, falling participation levels can spell the demise of a club. Falling participation levels mean reduced income for the club, loss of status in the community and an inability to maintain programs, events and facilities. 1.4. Organization of events. The organization of events is not only a primary task for all sport bodies but also a major aspect of sport development effort. Apart from the enjoyment that good events bring to participants and spectators, the organization of special events also provides other benefits such as assisting the organization, sport to gain publicity and promotion, providing an opportunity for sponsorship, and upskilling all persons involved in the planning and conduct of the event. 1.5. Nurturing of volunteerism. The sport industry depends to a very great extent on the work input of volunteers who coach, officiate at competitions and work on management committees of clubs. In recent times, some concerns have been voiced about the impact of modern life on volunteers. 1.6. Openness in political and administrative structure. There are few issues that have a greater negative impact on an organization than political infighting. When this occurs, much time and effort of key people in the organization is unproductive in terms of sport development. This is true at any level of the sports spectrum. Sometimes, however, political infighting is inevitable and unavoidable, and the sport/organization simply has to go through this stage. 1.7. Knowledge management. The issue of knowledge management in sport organizations is underappreciated. For an organization to be successful, it must capture knowledge from its experts and distribute it to others in its own jurisdiction. The organization's experts will include its leading coaches, administrators, curators and referees, and the channels of distribution will typically take the form of coaching and/or officiating manuals, policies and procedures, websites, etc. 1.8. Development of self-funding programs. The ability of a sport/organization, at any level, to be self-funding is highly respected by government. It means that a sport is not at risk of sudden and dramatic changes in funding levels that can result in the loss of key salaried staff, collapse of athlete development programs or the loss of key facilities. 1.9. Athlete development programs. Athlete development is, by its very nature, at the heart of what sport is about. Athlete development is not only about sport performance but also about developing social and ethical skills and preparing people for healthy and productive lives. 1.10. Forming partnerships with other sports organizations. There are a number of benefits that be gained if sport organizations work together in cases where this is feasible. The most notable benefit is in the development of facilities. Even though the high cost of building facilities is often assisted with government funding programs, sport organizations generally need to outlay sums of money of the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Such funding commitment is often beyond the capacity of a single sport organization but achievable if 2 or 3 organizations work together. Some more information about curricular pathways for migrants' empowerment through sport. CPEMS, at https://www.usport.org/goodgovernance. https://www.mvingasportbranch.com/cpemsinfo. Thank you for your attention and congratulations.